Ladies and gentlemen, it's crunch time. I'm Jefferson Penrod. The clock is running, so let's go to work. Let's start with this. I have been very impressed this season by just how much parity there is in college football. In past years, kind of once we've got into the season a couple weeks in, a couple teams at the top generally separate themselves. I mean, think back to past years with the Ohio States, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Georgias, kind of those, especially in the 14 playoff era where we kind of knew mostly who at least three of those four teams were going to be, if not four. And it was kind of, the top 5 or 6 we kind of knew were going to be the playoff teams. That is definitely not the case this year. We're going into week 6. It is week 6 right now. And generally, we don't really have any clue who the front runners or the favorites are. Sure, Vegas probably has their odds and things like that, but it's so wide open in college football. Let's just go down the AP top 10. First of all, we have Ohio State at number 1, and that Texas win looks less and less impressive as time goes on. Don't worry, we'll get to Texas being still in the top 10 at 9 in a minute, but that Texas win looks less and less impressive every year, and they let Washington hang around for way too long as the number 1 team should. When you go to number 2, Oregon does have the impressive Penn State win, but they're only 1 or 2 plays away from dropping that game. Remember, there was that controversial fumble/no fumble. Was his knee down? Was it not? Call. And they were almost going to lose that game despite leading that game most of the way. Miami at number 3, their Notre Dame win doesn't look that good anymore either. This week, though, against Florida State, that will be a huge test for them. You go to 4, Ole Miss jumped all the way up to 4 after their win over LSU, but LSU shouldn't have been that high in the first place. Obviously, the biggest problem with this now is preseason rankings. If preseason rankings didn't exist, then we wouldn't have these issues where, for example, LSU only stayed that high and looked so impressive because of Clemson, but we know Clemson is not good this year, and now LSU loses to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss jumps up to 4. Then you have Oklahoma at number 5, who looks very good, but John Mateer, their starting quarterback, who probably was the Heisman frontrunner, will miss significant time with an injury. 6 at Texas A&M. Texas A&M hasn't really wowed me at all this year. Yes, they do have the Notre Dame win, but again, Notre Dame should not have been 8th when they played. And so Texas A&M, even in their other games, like for example, they played Utah State, who I think is a pretty good team in the Mountain West, but for a top 10 SEC team, you let Utah State hang around with you for way longer than you should have. Penn State, we talked about, they lost their only competitive game thus far against Oregon. Their other 3 games were layups, and now they'll look to build up their resume throughout the rest of the season, but so far they haven't really proved anything. Indiana looked really, really good against Illinois, but the question is, will they be able to maintain that next week? They go to Oregon, and then later they have a game at Penn State, so those will be some big tests for them. Because again, in their non-conference, played a bunch of weak games. Obviously, they had that huge win over Illinois, but we don't really know how good Illinois is. Then moving on, Texas is only at 9 because they were the preseason number 3. I have this huge problem with preseason rankings because when you have preseason rankings that overhype teams just based off of last year and we don't know anything, it gets you into trouble later. And Texas has not shown that they should be a top 10 team. So, and even against some of those lesser competition, like UTSA, for example, their offense hasn't looked great. And then we go to number 10, Alabama, who does have the Georgia win, but they've been inconsistent. And I'm not just talking about the Florida State win or Florida State loss, but other games that they've played, they haven't always looked super consistent. So, all that being said, that was just the AP Top 10. Point being, there aren't any teams that I feel like are far and away obvious frontrunners to win the college football playoff this year, like we've had in years previous where we've had the Alabamas and the Clemsons and the Georgias and Ohio States. They're so far ahead of everyone else that we kind of knew halfway through the season that was going to be the playoff. And listen, I'm not complaining one bit about the parity. I love it. It means we have good games, competitive games every week, big games with big implications. But the problem is that we need to realize what impact that these preseason rankings have on everything that we're doing, because a lot of people think, oh yeah, the AP poll doesn't really matter because we get into the college football playoff rankings. But I bet you that the college football playoff rankings are influenced heavily by the AP poll. So that's my biggest problem with preseason rankings. But again, I'm not complaining at all one bit. We have lots of good games ahead of us between top-ranked teams, and it should be a lot of fun. Let's go to this now in the NFL. I want to talk a little bit about the Los Angeles Chargers. I should not have doubted the Chargers coming into the season, but I definitely did. For those of you that listen to the Game 7 podcast, when we picked the Week 1 NFL games, I thought the Chiefs were going to run away with the game in Brazil, whereas the Chargers almost looked at times like they were controlling that game. And then, obviously, they've won. They're 3-1 so far. They did have that loss last week against the Giants with the spark with Jackson Dart and everything. But other 3 games have been against their division rivals, against the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Raiders, and they've won all 3 of those games. I mean, I thought the Chargers would just be the same as they always have been since Justin Herbert got there. You know, they won't win the division over the Chiefs, but they're competitive. They'll make a wild card, but then lose in the first round. But I would say that I'm wrong, and I hope that I'm wrong because the Chargers are a very fun team to watch. Justin Herbert looks to be having a career year, maybe the best year that he's ever played football. So far in only 4 games, he has over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, completing passes at 64%. Their first, like I said, those first 3 wins were over teams in their division. I think they have what it takes this year to win their division against, they've obviously the Chiefs are always going to be tough to put away. The Broncos looked very good last year and are building, and the Raiders are maybe a little bit downward from those other 2 teams, but the Raiders will also make those games competitive. So I think that they have what it takes. They have what it takes to win their division and finally get over the hump and win a playoff game. By the way, their defense looks very good as well. Defense is 3rd in yards allowed and 5th in sacks. And I think that's the key for the Chargers. If they can play well on both sides of the ball, they'll be able to get things done. So look for them to make some noise in the AFC this year. We're going to go ahead and take a quick timeout. We'll be back in just a second. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to check out the Game 7 podcast, where I, along with my co-host Jackson Jones, look at the biggest stories and make predictions for the biggest games each week. Welcome back to Crunch Time. It's time now for our 2-minute drill. I'll go ahead. Clock will go up here in just a second. I have to start a separate clock on my computer, but clock will run in 3, 2, 1. Today it was announced that the Cleveland Browns are changing their starting quarterback, benching the veteran Joe Flacco for 3rd-round pick Dillon Gabriel. This is, a big change for the Browns. A lot of people, there's that quarterback controversy in training camp, and already this is the 5th game of the season. They're going in a different direction, going to Dillon Gabriel. The offense is the bottom half in nearly every single statistic that they could be in. By the way, they're 31st in points scored, only averaging 14 points a game. Flacco moves to quarterback 2, and Shedeur Sanders stays at quarterback number 3. We'll see if any movement goes on there. This will be a tough first game for Gabriel in London. I mean, international travel is always tough, but against the Vikings, a very good defense. Brian Flores, always a great defensive coordinator, so it'll be interesting to see how he does in his first start there. Now in baseball, the Red Sox and the Yankees played last night in the first game of their wild card. Maybe this is personal to me because I'm a Red Sox fan. I want to get more into baseball, but the Red Sox have always been my team. It was a great game last night. They got it done 3-1 in New York City. All 3 of those wildcard games, if it goes to a third, will be in New York, so no switching back and forth. Aroldis Chapman, the Red Sox closer, allowed 3 straight singles in the 9th inning before getting all 3 outs with the bases loaded. Very good performance by him, and Game 2 is tonight. And last thing I want to talk about in the 2-minute drill, NBA basketball. We're almost back for NBA basketball. Training camps are going on. We've seen a lot of those media day clips and pictures. Some teams are filling out their rosters. We saw that the Golden State Warriors added Al Horford as well as Seth Curry to go along with his brother Steph Curry. So it's maybe some multi-Curry lineups going on. We'll talk more about basketball as the season gets closer, but opening night is October 21st, so just under 3 weeks away. I'm very excited. I love basketball. It'll be fun to be back. And yeah, that we made it again on the 2-minute drill. So good job, me, I guess, for knowing how much I can talk for 2 minutes. But that is going to do it for this episode of Crunch Time. Make sure to follow along on Instagram at Crunch Time with Jeffy. Subscribe to the YouTube. Follow if you're listening on podcasts. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back here on Friday.